I woke up in an unfamiliar place. I was sitting in a chair, surrounded by other people. I had playing cards in my hands, and they told me it was my turn. That's the first thing I remember. Not my name, not where I came from, not even the face in the mirror that morning. Just those 5 words, spoken by a woman with a kind but impatient face, hanging in the air like a puff of smoke. "Helen, honey, it's your turn." My hands felt strange, disconnected from my brain. They were holding a fan of cards, a 10 of hearts, a jack of clubs, a 2 of spades. It was a meaningless jumble of colors and shapes. The hand itself was the real shock. It was wrinkled, with pale, thin skin stretched over prominent knuckles, and a faint brown spot near the thumb. This wasn't my hand. My hands were, well, they weren't this. They were younger, weren't they? Capable. They could knead bread dough and repot an orchid without trembling. This hand looked like it belonged to my grandmother. "Helen?" the woman said again, a little more insistently this time. She had a halo of soft white hair and was wearing a cardigan the color of a dusty rose. To her left, a man with a comb-over and a hearing aid adjusted himself in his wheelchair. He let out a little grunt. "It's hearts, Helen. We're playing hearts." Hearts. The name of the game meant nothing. Helen. The name felt like a borrowed coat. It covered me, but it didn't fit right. I looked at the cards again, my heart starting to pound a low, frantic rhythm against my ribs. It felt like that moment in a dream when you realize you're in front of a whole audience, but you've forgotten all your lines for the play. Except I wasn't dreaming. The smell in the air was too real. A sterile, slightly sweet scent of disinfectant mixed with something like overcooked peas. The light overhead was a flat, unforgiving, fluorescent glare. I looked around the table. The dusty rose woman, the hearing aid man, whose name, I would learn, was George, a third woman, tiny and bird-like, with glasses as thick as bottle bottoms, was peering at her own cards with ferocious concentration. Mildred. 4 people, at a card table, in a bright, cheerless room decorated with watercolor paintings of sailboats. Where on God's green earth was I? I'm sorry, I stammered. The voice that came out was thin, reedy, another stranger. I can't remember. The dusty rose woman, Evelyn, let out a sigh. It wasn't a mean sigh, more of a weary one. The kind you let out when the toast burns for the 3rd time in a week. "Oh dear, it's one of your bad days, isn't it?" She reached a similarly spotted hand across the table and patted mine. "Don't you worry. We'll skip your turn for now. Just relax. It'll come back to you." George grunted again. "Happens every few weeks. Throws the whole rhythm of the game off." Mildred didn't even look up. "Lay down a low heart, Helen, or pass. It's not rocket science." My mind was a complete blank. It wasn't just foggy. It was a pristine, empty white room with no doors and no windows. I had no idea who these people were. No idea who Helen was. No idea how I got into this chair. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over me. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt wobbly, disconnected. My hand flew to my chest, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Now, what's all this fuss?" A new voice cut through my terror. It was syrupy sweet, but carried an edge of steel. A young woman in bright blue scrubs with cartoon animals printed on them was bustling over. She had a wide, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Helen, honey, are we getting agitated again? What did we say about remembering to stay calm?" She put a firm hand on my shoulder, gently pushing me back down into the chair. It wasn't a violent gesture, but it was insistent, unyielding. It was the kind of pressure you use to manage a disobedient child or an unruly pet.
"I don't know where I am," I said, the words tumbling out. "Who are these people? Who are you?" The woman in scrubs, whose name tag read, Brenda, CNA let out a little chuckle. Oh, you're such a kidder sometimes. She turned to the rest of the table. Her blood sugar is probably just a little low. I'll go get her some juice. You all carry on. She patted my shoulder again, a gesture meant to be reassuring, but felt deeply patronizing. And then she was gone. A kidder. The word bounced around in the empty room of my mind. It implied a history, a personality. It implied that this blankness wasn't new, that this had happened before. And that idea was somehow more terrifying than waking up in a strange place. It suggested that I was trapped in a loop, a horrible, repeating nightmare I couldn't remember starting. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. The he in question wasn't even a speck on my radar yet. Forgive me, sometimes the memory of the ending is so sweet, it bubbles up when I'm still talking about the beginning. Back then, there was no he, just a terrifying what. What was happening to me? Evelyn, the woman in the dusty rose cardigan, tried to be kind. It's okay, honey. My mother had days like this toward the end. Everything just slips away for a bit. You're at a nice place. You're safe here. A nice place, safe. The words felt like lies. I looked down at my wrist. A thin, white plastic band was clasped around it. On it, printed in black letters, was a name. Helen Peterson. And below it, a number. It looked exactly like a hospital bracelet. I felt my stomach clench. This wasn't just a community center or a strange bridge club. I was an inmate, a patient, a prisoner. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a silent daze. Brenda came back with a small cup of apple juice, and I drank it meekly. The card game continued around me. I listened to the quiet snap of the cards hitting the table, the occasional grunt from George or a sigh from Evelyn. I tried to search the blankness in my head for anything, a single familiar image or sound, a name of a child, the color of my own front door, the taste of my favorite food. Nothing came. There was only the before, the endless white void, and the now, this sterile room, these strange old faces, and the crushing weight of a life I couldn't remember living. After the card game, Brenda came back for me. All right, Helen, time for a little rest before dinner. She helped me up. I felt like a marionette, my limbs being guided by her firm hands. She walked me down a long, identical-looking hallway. The walls were a pale, vaguely cheerful yellow. Every door was the same. Residents, as she called them, sat in chairs in their rooms, some watching television, others just staring blankly into space. A wave of despair, so profound it was almost physical, washed over me. This was a place where people came to be forgotten. A place where lives ended not with a bang, but with the quiet, gradual fading of the person they used to be. And somehow, I was one of them. Brenda led me into a room marked 12B and guided me to the edge of a nightly made bed with a crisp, thin blanket. The room was small and meticulously tidy. On a dresser across from the bed sat a collection of silver-framed photographs. I stared at them, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. There was a photo of a handsome man with kind eyes and a sprinkle of gray in his dark hair. Was that my husband? Beside it, a younger man, who shared his eyes, stood with his arm around a sharp-featured woman with perfectly styled blonde hair. She was smiling, but it looked more like a baring of teeth. Their 2 children, a boy and a girl, stood in front of them dressed in matching sailor outfits. My son? My grandchildren? They were complete strangers to me. Looking at their smiling faces felt like looking at a family in a catalog. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition. "There you are," Brenda said brightly, fluffing my pillow. "Your lovely family. You're so lucky to have them." I pointed a trembling finger at the photo of the man and the blonde woman. Who are they? Brenda's smile tightened just a fraction. Why, that's your son, Michael, and his wonderful wife, Sarah, and your beautiful grandchildren, of course. Sarah was just here yesterday. Don't you remember? She brought you that lovely new nightgown. She gestured to a pink, frilly thing folded on a chair.
Sarah. The name hit a dull, discordant note in the back of my mind. Sarah. I stared at her picture. That sharp, predatory smile. There was something there. Something just beneath the surface of the void. A feeling I couldn't name. Not love. Not warmth. It was more like the feeling you get when you hear a faint scraping sound in the walls late at night. A feeling of unease. Of danger. Brenda left, telling me to have a nice nap, and the door clicked shut behind her, plunging the room into a quiet hush. I didn't nap. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to push through the white wall in my mind. The more I pushed, the more it resisted. It was like trying to punch my way through a cloud. Frustration gave way to a cold, hard knot of anger. This wasn't right. I didn't know much, but I knew with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones that I didn't belong here. This tidy little room felt like a cage. The photographs felt like props. The story Brenda told me about my lovely family felt like a script. I was a character in a play I hadn't auditioned for. And the character I was meant to play was a dotty, helpless old woman named Helen who had bad days and needed to be managed with apple juice and condescending pats on the shoulder. No. I stood up, my legs feeling a little stronger now, fueled by this new fire. I walked over to the small window and looked out. It overlooked a manicured patch of grass, a serenity garden, with a concrete bird bath in the center. Beyond that was a high fence. I turned my attention back to the room. If this was my life, there had to be clues. I wasn't an investigator, but you live 6 or 7 decades, or so my reflection implied, and you learn how to put things together. I opened the top drawer of the dresser. It was filled with neatly folded undergarments and socks. The second drawer held sweaters. The third, a jumble of things. A half-finished book of crossword puzzles, a pair of reading glasses, a small, leather-bound book with a gold leaf H on the cover. A diary. My hands shook as I picked it up. This was it. This had to be it. My life, my memories, written down in my own hand. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, a loop in cursive I distantly recognized. It was dated January 1st of that year. New Year. Michael and Sarah gave me this journal for Christmas. Sarah said it would be good for me to document my thoughts. I think she just wants to make sure I'm not losing my marbles so she can keep her claws out of the inheritance. She's subtle as a brick, that one. But it's a nice little book. Maybe I'll write in it after all. Something to keep my mind sharp. I felt a jolt, like a small electrical shock. That voice on the page, cynical, sharp, a little funny. It felt more real to me than anything I'd experienced all day. I frantically flipped through the pages. The entries were sporadic. Some days were just notes about the weather or a book I was reading. But as I got further in, the tone began to change. February 12th. Had a strange spell today. Couldn't remember where I put my keys for a full hour. Found them in the sugar bowl. I laughed it off, but it was unsettling. March 5th. Sarah came over. She keeps talking about how big my house is for one person. kept mentioning a lovely retirement community her friend's mother just moved into. I told her I'd move out of my house when they carried me out in a box and not a minute before. She did not find that amusing. April 16th. Michael seems worried. Sarah has been whispering in his ear again. He mentioned seeing a doctor, just for a checkup. He says my forgetfulness is getting worse. Am I forgetting things? It's hard to tell if you're forgetting things because you forget. The last entry was dated 2 months ago. My blood ran cold as I read it. May 21st. Something is very wrong. Sarah drove me to a doctor's appointment I don't remember making. A new doctor. He asked me a lot of questions. Who is the president? What year is it? I knew the answers, of course. But then he held up 4 objects on a tray and told me to remember them. A key, a ball, a pen, and a book. 10 minutes later, he asked me what they were. I couldn't remember a single one of them. I swear I never saw them before in my life. Sarah had this look on her face, a look of triumph. She squeezed my arm and said, "See, Mom, we're just worried about you. I'm not stupid. This is a trap. I feel like an animal being backed into a corner."
That was the last entry. The rest of the pages were blank. I slammed the journal shut. A trap. The word echoed in the silence. It confirmed everything my gut had been screaming at me all day. Sarah, that sharp-faced woman with the plastic smile, she had done this. She and my own son had put me in this place. They had me declared incompetent. They had me locked away. The shock of it was so immense it almost blanked my mind out again. But the anger was a powerful anchor. The sheer, audacious cruelty of it. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. This diary was the key. They left it here because they assumed I was too far gone to ever read it or understand it. They saw me as a piece of furniture they could safely store away while they took over my house, my money, my life. They underestimated Helen Peterson. And I, the ghost currently occupying her body, was about to become their worst nightmare. My memory was gone, but my intelligence wasn't. My history was erased, but my will was forged in steel. I didn't know who I had been, but I knew who I was about to become. I was going to be the woman who got out of here, and I was going to make them pay. I tucked the journal under the mattress of my bed. That was my first conscious, strategic decision, hiding the evidence. My mind started to work, no longer a blank page, but a whirring engine. Escape was one thing. I needed a plan. I needed resources. I needed an ally. These places, they monitor everything. Phone calls? Mail? I couldn't just walk out the front door. I looked around the room again, my eyes scanning for any kind of tool. Then my gaze fell on the neatly folded pink nightgown on the chair, the one Sarah had brought me yesterday. Tucked into the pocket was a small get-well-soon card with a picture of a kitten on it. Inside, her familiar, spiky handwriting read, "Mom, hope you're settling in well. So glad you're safe and cared for. Love, Sarah." Below it, a new piece of information. She'd scrawled her cell phone number. An oversight. A tiny little mistake, and it was all the opening I needed. The next morning, I woke up before the pale dawn light had even touched the window. For a terrifying second, the white void was back. The room was unfamiliar, the air heavy with that same antiseptic smell. Then my eyes fell on the dresser, and the smiling, predatory face of Sarah in the silver frame brought it all rushing back. The journal, the trap, the plan that was still just a flicker of rage in the dark. I stayed in bed, regulating my breathing, and forced myself into character. Today, I was Helen Peterson, the sweet, confused old dear.
My life depended on playing this part perfectly. When Brenda came in with her offensively cheerful, "Rise and shine, sleepyhead," I gave her a watery, vacant smile. I let her help me with my dress. I let her guide me to the dining hall. I was an empty vessel, a docile lamb. And all the while, I was watching. The dining hall at the Pine Senior Living Community, that's what the welcome brochure on the front table called it, was a masterclass in beige. Beige walls, beige floor, beige tablecloths. The food, a plate of lukewarm scrambled eggs and a piece of pale toast, continued the theme. I sat at my assigned table with Evelyn, George, and Mildred. "Good morning, Helen. You seem a little more yourself today," Evelyn said warmly. I gave a vague smile and nodded. "A little better, I think. Still fuzzy." It was important to give them a trail of breadcrumbs. They needed to believe my memory came and went, a flickering light bulb. It would make my lucid moments seem less suspicious. For the next week, I was the model resident. I sat through bingo games, staring at my card without really seeing it. I clapped along, slightly offbeat, during the sing-alongs led by a perky activities director named Deb. I nodded and smiled at the staff's inane chatter. On the outside, I was fading away, just another soul in God's waiting room. But on the inside, I was a spy gathering intelligence. I learned the staff rotations. Brenda, my primary jailer, worked the 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift. She was lazy about paperwork, but meticulous about control. A night aide named Carlos often dozed off in the lounge chair by the nurse's station after 2 a.m. The cleaning staff were mostly ignored, invisible as they moved from room to room, a potential vulnerability in the system. I also studied my fellow inmates. Most, like Evelyn, had accepted their fate. They were kind, gentle people whose worlds had shrunk to the size of this building. A few, like George, were angry about it, but their anger was a sputtering, impotent thing. But there was one person who didn't fit in.
His name was Arthur Vance. He never came to the sing-alongs or bingo. He took his meals at a small table by himself in the corner of the dining hall. He was tall and gaunt, with a mane of white hair that he probably thought looked leonine, but mostly just looked untamed. He moved with a stiff-legged gait, leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane. The staff left him alone. There was an aura about him, a quiet intensity that their forced cheerfulness couldn't penetrate. While everyone else was reading large-print romance novels or watching game shows on the communal TV, Arthur Vance read thick, heavy-looking books bound in dark leather. I couldn't see the titles from across the room, but they didn't look like pleasant beach reads. He was my target. An animal that isolates itself from the herd is either sick or dangerous. I was betting on dangerous. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Apologies. There I go again, jumping ahead. The he I'm thinking of is my son, Michael, and his puppet master wife. But before I could deal with them, I had to get to Arthur. My chance came one afternoon during the mandated quiet time after lunch. I saw Arthur head into the library, a grand name for what was essentially a large closet with a few shelves of donated paperbacks. I followed a few minutes later, feigning a meandering, confused walk. He was sitting in one of the 2 lumpy armchairs, a massive book open in his lap. I shuffled over to a nearby shelf and pretended to scan the titles. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the cover of his book, The Principles of Contract Law. My heart gave a little leap. "Who are you?" he asked without looking up. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble. So he knew my name. I was being watched too. "Oh, I don't know," I said in my frail Helen voice. "It's all so confusing. I can't seem to
to focus on the words these days. I picked a random book off the shelf, something by Daniel Steele. I let it slip through my fingers, making a soft thump as it hit the carpeted floor. As I bent down, a slow, creaky performance of aged effort, I made sure to drop my room key, which I had palmed from my pocket. It clattered on the floor near his feet. He sighed, a sound of profound irritation, and slowly, deliberately marked his page. He leaned forward with a groan and picked up the key. As he held it out to me, his sharp, intelligent gray eyes met mine. This was the moment. No more frail Helen. I looked directly at him, holding his gaze, and I didn't smile. I let him see the focus, the calculation. "It is my belief," I said, my voice low and clear, completely shedding the breathy confusion, that a binding agreement was broken through misrepresentation and fraudulent inducement. He froze, his hand still outstretched with my key. His eyes narrowed. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. The mask of a grumpy old man fell away, and I saw the lawyer inside. A flicker of something, surprise, intrigue, danced in his expression. "A tortoise interference with contractual relations, perhaps," he rumbled back, his voice now a conspiratorial whisper. He handed me the key. "My room is 27A, at the end of the hall. The lock has been broken for 6 months, but no one seems to care. Meet me there in an hour. Don't be seen." He picked up his law book, and the wall came back down. He was once again just a crotchety old man in a library. I took the key, my hand trembling slightly with adrenaline, and shuffled out of the room. I had my ally. An hour later, I made my way to 27A. Arthur's room was twice the size of mine, a premium suite, I suppose. It was cluttered with books and stacks of papers. It smelled of old paper, pipe tobacco, and peppermint. He was sitting in an armchair by the window, a glass of what looked like amber liquid in his hand. "Whiskey," he said, gesturing to the glass. "One of the few privileges my exorbitant monthly fee affords. Sit." He pointed the glass toward another chair. I sat down, my purse in my lap. Inside it was the leather-bound journal. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. My name is Helen Peterson. At least, that's what they tell me. 3 weeks ago, I woke up at a card table with no memory of who I was or how I got here. Yesterday, I found a diary I'd been keeping. I laid it all out. The entries about Sarah, the trap at the doctor, the sudden memory loss. I took the diary out and handed it to him. "Read the last entry, May 21st. He took the journal, pulled out a pair of spectacles from his pocket, and read the page I indicated. He read it twice. The silence in the room stretched out, thick and heavy. When he finally looked up, the lawyer was fully present in his eyes. The tired old man was gone.
"This is coercion," he said, his voice a low growl. "They manufactured evidence for a competency hearing you weren't even prepared for. Your daughter-in-law, Sarah, you said? She sounds like a piranha." "She is," I said, the conviction in my voice surprising me. It was a memory of feeling, if not of fact. And my son, her husband, is her willing accomplice. "Sons can be a disappointment," Arthur said, a shadow of his own history crossing his face. "So, Helen Peterson with no memory. What is it you want from me?" "I want you to tell me how to burn their whole world to the ground," I said. A slow, predatory smile spread across Arthur Vance's face. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen since I woke up in this place. "I like your style," he said. "Unfortunately, scorched earth litigation is a marathon, not a sprint. and we're starting from 100 yards behind the line, in a cage. He stood up and began to pace, his cane tapping a soft, rhythmic beat on the floor. Here's the mountain we have to climb. 1. You've been legally declared incompetent by a court. Your son and his wife likely have power of attorney and medical guardianship. They control your life and, more importantly, your finances. 2. To overturn that, we need a new hearing. To get a new hearing, we need a petition filed by a lawyer on the outside. 3. To win that hearing, we need a new, independent medical evaluation from a reputable geriatric psychiatrist who will testify that you are, in fact, competent. And 4, none of that can happen while you're still a prisoner here. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his eyes boring into mine. The first step in this grand campaign of ours is that you, Helen, have to escape. My breath hitched. Escape? It sounded impossible. How? They watch us constantly. There's a fence. Fences are for cattle, Arthur said dismissively. We are not cattle. This place runs on routine and the assumption that we are all senile and helpless. That is their weakness. We'll use it. But first, we need to communicate with the outside world securely. Do you have any resources? Any contacts? Anyone on the outside you might trust? The void in my head gave me no answers. Friends? Other family? There was nothing. Then I remembered the card. My daughter-in-law, she's not just cruel, she's sloppy. She wrote me a get well card. She wrote her cell phone number in it. Arthur's smile returned. An unforced error. Beautiful. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. We can't use the phones here. They'd log the call. We need a disposable cell phone. A burner. Where in God's name do we get a burner phone in a nursing home? You'd be surprised what you can acquire when you know who to ask, he said with a wink. Remember Carlos, the night aide? The one who sleeps on the job? I nodded. His son has a gambling problem. And Carlos has a penchant for borrowing from the residents' petty cash boxes when he thinks no one is looking. I believe Mr. Carlos is a man who can be motivated. The plan was risky, terrifying even. It involved blackmail, a clandestine escape, and a legal battle against my own family. But the thought of Sarah's face when she realized her harmless, forgotten mother-in-law was coming for her, that was worth any risk. It was a spark in the darkness. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming the person I was, even if I couldn't remember her. The fight itself would be my memory. The week leading up to our motivational chat with Carlos was the longest of my life. Arthur coached me, late at night in his book-filled room. We'd sit in the dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the window, and he would grill me. What is Carlos's wife's name? Maria, I'd answer. How many children? 3, 2 boys, 1 girl. What's the name of the casino his son got into trouble at? The Riverboat Royale in the next county. Arthur had made it his business to know the pressure points of everyone who worked at the Pines. It was his form of life insurance. To control a man like Carlos, you can't just threaten him. You have to offer him salvation. You present him with the poison and the antidote in the same hand. He'll always choose the antidote. The poison, of course, was Arthur's detailed knowledge of Carlos's petty thefts, which he documented with dates and amounts in a small black notebook. The antidote was cash. My cash. As Arthur predicted, I found it exactly where I'd hidden it. A crazy old lady move that had turned out to be brilliant. Tucked inside my late husband's copy of Moby Dick, a book he despised and I knew no one would ever open, were 5 crisp $100 bills. A little emergency fund my old self had the foresight to put away. It felt like a message from the woman I used to be. I'm still here. Go get 'em.
The exchange went down in a disused utility closet at 3 in the morning. Arthur had me feign a dizzy spell, and when Carlos helped me back to my room, Arthur was waiting just inside the door, looking like the Grim Reaper in a bathrobe. He didn't raise his voice. He simply laid out the facts of Carlos's borrowing habits, presented the neat column of figures in his notebook, and then mentioned, ever so casually, how much trouble a parolee could get into over a parole violation. Carlos went white as a sheet. Then Arthur made the offer. $200 for a simple, untraceable phone with a prepaid minute plan. An extra $100 for future considerations. And for this money, Arthur finished, his voice like grinding stone, you also purchase our silence and your continued employment. Carlos was shaking, but greed won out over fear. He agreed. 2 nights later, a small cardboard box containing a cheap, plastic-wrapped burner phone appeared under the cushion of the lounge chair in the main hall. Step 1 was complete. We had a phone, we had Sarah's number, and we were about to place the most important call of my life. The whole plan hinged on the person who answered being exactly who Arthur thought he would be. Don't go anywhere. The target was not Sarah. Never engage the primary antagonist directly until your position is fortified, Arthur lectured. We're not fortified. We're 2 inmates in a 5-star prison. No, the first call was to a man named David Chen. David was my last protege before I retired, Arthur told me, turning the small burner phone over and over in his large arthritic hands. He was brilliant, hungry, and a little too idealistic. I tempered him. He owes me. More than that, he loathed corporate bullies and the kind of entitlement that allows a woman like your daughter-in-law to thrive. We huddled in Arthur's room, the door wedged shut with a rubber stop. I watched as he punched in the number from memory. A man who couldn't walk to the dining hall without leaning on a cane could remember a 10-digit phone number he hadn't dialed in years. The mind is a funny thing. Arthur cleared his throat as the phone rang. Chen. A sharp voice answered on the 3rd ring. David, it's Arthur Vance, Arthur said, and the years seemed to fall away from his voice. It was strong, resonant, the voice of a man who commanded courtrooms. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Arthur? My God, I thought, well, I'd heard you were indisposed, Arthur supplied wryly. That is an accurate assessment. I'm calling because I've taken on a new client. Pro bono. Her name is Helen Peterson. She's been the victim of a rather nasty piece of legal chicanery involving a fraudulent competency declaration executed by her heirs for financial gain. He paused, letting the words sink in. It's the sort of case you'd have adored back in the day, all the righteous indignation your little crusader's heart could desire. He proceeded to give David the condensed version of my story. I listened, amazed at how he framed it, not as the confused ramblings from a forgotten diary, but as a calculated, predatory legal maneuver that demanded a swift and aggressive response. He made it sound like the crime of the century. By the end of it, I almost believed I was that fearsome, wronged woman he was describing. Maybe I was. What do you need, Arthur? David asked, his voice now grim and focused. First, I need you to file a petition for a new competency hearing. Cite elder abuse and legal malpractice on the part of her previous counsel, whoever that puppet was. Second, and more immediately, Mrs. Peterson requires extraction. She will be leaving her current residence this Saturday at precisely 2:30 p.m. You will arrange for a discreet vehicle and driver to be waiting for her at the service entrance on the east side of the Pines Senior Living Community. The gate will be unlocked. From there, you will take her somewhere safe. A hotel. Your own home. I don't care. Just make her disappear. Third, you will engage the services of Dr. Alistair Finch. You remember him? The geriatric psychiatrist who delights in dismantling the testimony of quacks? Book him for a full evaluation of Mrs. Peterson and have him on retainer for expert testimony. It was a masterstroke, a whole campaign laid out in a single 3-minute phone call. David didn't hesitate. Consider it done, Arthur. It's good to hear your voice. Save the sentiment, Arthur grumbled, but I saw a faint smile touch his lips. Keep this number.
It is to be used only in an emergency. I'll be in touch." He hung up. The room was silent. "Well," he said to me, turning to me, "the cavalry has been summoned. Now we just have to get you over the wall." The escape was planned with military precision around the Pines' annual summer luau. As Arthur had predicted, it was the perfect cover. The staff would be distracted, herding residents in floral shirts out to the patio. Families would be milling about, creating a sea of unfamiliar faces for me to blend into. And our man Carlos would be manning the drink station, a perfect opportunity for him to slip away and unlock the service gate. Our $100 future considerations fee was about to be put to good use.
I played my part. I expressed childish delight when Deb, the activities director, handed me a plastic lei to wear. I let them seat me at a picnic table on the lawn. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure it was visible through my thin cotton blouse. I scanned the area. There was the patio, buzzing with people. There was the main building. And there, at the far edge of the manicured lawn, half hidden by a row of overgrown azalea bushes, was the service gate, my gateway to freedom. Arthur was sitting at a table in the shade, observing the whole scene like a hawk. He wasn't even pretending to enjoy himself. He was watching Brenda, watching Carlos, watching me. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The plan was simple. I was to complain of a headache from the sun. It was a complaint so common among the residents that it wouldn't raise an eyebrow. Brenda, who was in charge of our section, would tell me to go lie down. She wouldn't escort me. She was too busy trying to coax Mildred into participating in the hula hoop contest. That would give me a 5-minute window to walk, not run, back toward the building. But instead of going inside, I would veer off behind the azalea bushes. Carlos would have unlocked the gate 5 minutes prior. The car, a boring gray sedan, would be waiting on the access road just beyond. I took a deep breath. Time to act. I put a hand to my forehead and adopted a pained expression. "Oh, my," I said to the woman next to me. "The sun is giving me a terrible headache." It worked exactly as Arthur said it would. Brenda came over, all patronizing sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. Why don't you go on inside and lie down for a bit? We'll save you a fruit skewer." I stood up slowly, feigning dizziness. I turned and began my walk. Each step was a lifetime. My back was tingling, expecting a hand on my shoulder, a voice calling, "Helen, where are you going?" But no one called. They were all watching Mildred, who had surprisingly good hula hoop rhythm. I passed the entrance to the main building and kept going, my heart in my throat. I ducked behind the row of scratchy bushes, the leaves pulling at my sleeves. And there it was, the gate. It was closed, but a small silver padlock was hanging open on the latch. Carlos had done his part. My hands trembled as I pulled the gate open. It made a low, rusty groan. I slipped through and pulled it shut behind me. Across a small patch of gravel, a nondescript gray sedan was parked, exactly as promised. The back door opened. A young, serious-looking man in a suit, David Chen, I presumed, looked out at me. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm David. Arthur sent me. Get in. We need to go." I scrambled into the back of the car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. He closed the door, got into the driver's seat, and the car pulled away smoothly, leaving the pines and my cage behind in the rearview mirror. I looked back just once. From this distance, it looked so peaceful, with the colorful paper lanterns and the sound of music drifting on the air, a prison disguised as a party. As we drove, my adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a profound and dizzying sense of freedom. And then a thought hit me, cold and clear. Sarah, what would she do when they finally realized I was Bon? Panic? Call the police? For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm me.
I was a fugitive, an old woman with no memory, on the run from her own family. Then I thought of Arthur, sitting back in that beige hellhole, a king on a broken throne, putting all his faith in me. I thought of the diary, safe in my purse, a testament to the woman I was and the injustice she suffered. The fear receded, replaced by something hard and cool, determination. She was about to get exactly what she deserved, and I had a front row seat. All the power she thought she had was about to be revealed as a house of cards in a hurricane, and I was the storm. I leaned back against the leather seat of the car, and for the first time since I woke up at that card table, I smiled. A real smile. It felt a little rusty, but it worked. David Chen drove with a calm, focused efficiency that I found deeply reassuring. He didn't pepper me with questions or offer platitudes. He just drove, his eyes checking the rearview mirror a little more often than was probably normal. I watched the bland suburban landscape slide by, the manicured lawns in identical houses, looking like a diorama of a life I might have once lived. It was all alien to me. The world outside the pines was louder, faster, and infinitely more complicated. "We're heading to a corporate apartment in the city," David said finally, his voice breaking the silence. "It's secure, private, and paid for through the firm's general account, untraceable to you for at least a few days. Dr. Finch will meet us there in 2 hours."
Dr. Alistair Finch, I said, testing the name. Arthur holds him in high regard. David glanced at me in the mirror, a faint smile on his face. Arthur considers anyone who isn't a blithering idiot to be a peerless genius, but in Finch's case, he's right. Alistair is the best. He can tell the difference between a clinical diagnosis and a convenient one. He's unbamboozleable. The apartment was on the 15th floor of a sleek, anonymous glass tower downtown. It was minimalist and modern, all cool tones of gray and chrome, the polar opposite of the frilly, condescending decor of the Pines. It felt like a decompression chamber, a neutral space where I could finally take a full, deep breath. David made me a cup of tea, then sat across from me at a small glass dining table. "All right, Helen, here's what's about to happen. At the Pines, they'll have done their 3 o'clock head count by now. They've discovered you're not in your room. Panic will be setting in." He ticked the points off on his fingers. 1. They will call your son and daughter-in-law. 2. Sarah, Arthur was very specific about her, will immediately assume you've wandered off in a state of confusion. She'll put on a performance of the worried daughter. 3. They will call the police and report you as a missing, endangered adult. They will give you your picture. They will stress your memory problems and your vulnerable state. I felt a chill, despite the warmth of the teacup in my hands. He was describing my own disappearance, and it sounded like I was already dead, a ghost being discussed in the past tense. "This is why our timeline is critical," David continued, leaning forward. "Dr. Finch's evaluation is everything. As soon as I have his preliminary report confirming you are of sound mind, I will formally notify your son's lawyer that you have retained new counsel and are petitioning the court to reverse the guardianship. We hit them before they can build their narrative of the senile old woman who ran away. We redefine the situation. You didn't wander off. You walked out to reclaim your life." There was a sharp buzz from the building's intercom. "That'll be the doctor," David said, standing up. "Now, Helen, be honest with him. Don't hide the memory loss. Hide anything and he'll see it, and it will undermine everything. Your strength isn't in pretending to be whole. It's in proving you are brilliant, even with a piece of you missing." Arthur was very clear on that. Dr. Alistair Finch was a small, neat man in his late 60s with a halo of white hair, a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, and eyes that were astonishingly blue and missed absolutely nothing. He didn't treat me like a specimen or a child. He shook my hand firmly and looked me directly in the eye. "Mrs. Peterson, a pleasure to meet you. Shall we talk?"
For the next 3 hours, we talked. It was less of an examination and more of a guided conversation. He started with the basics, the same questions the other doctor had asked, according to my diary. Who is the president? What year is it? I answered them easily, but then he veered off script. He asked about the book I'd been reading when my memory lapsed, according to the last entry. He discussed the plot, the characters, and asked for my analysis. He showed me a complex abstract painting on the apartment wall and asked me for my interpretation. He gave me logical puzzles, mathematical word problems, ethical dilemmas. And all the while, he watched. He watched how I processed information. He listened to my vocabulary, my sentence structure, the way I formulated an argument. He wasn't testing what I remembered. He was testing how I thought. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Let's talk about the blank space, Helen," he said gently. "Tell me what it's like." So I told him. I described the white room, the feeling of waking up in the middle of a play where everyone but you has a script. I told him about the wrinkled hand that didn't feel like my own, and the terror of not recognizing my own face in the mirror. I also told him about finding the diary, about formulating the plan with Arthur, about understanding the need for strategy and secrecy. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Dr. Finch listened without interruption, his blue eyes fixed on my face. When he finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Based on your own account and the documentation in your journal, you've likely experienced an episode of severe dissociative or psychogenic amnesia. It's a rare condition, often triggered by extreme trauma or stress. In your case, the trauma of realizing your autonomy was being systematically stripped from you." He leaned forward again, a small, reassuring smile on his lips. "Here's the crucial part, Helen. You have lost access to your autobiographical memory, your history, your personal experiences, but your cognitive functions, what we call executive functions, are not just intact, they are exceptional. Your logic, your reasoning, your ability to plan, to comprehend complex legal and social situations. You are operating at an extremely high level. You are without a shadow of a doubt a competent adult."
The word hung in the air, luminous. Competent. A single word that meant the difference between freedom and imprisonment. Tears pricked my eyes, the first I'd shed since this whole nightmare began. "Your memory loss is a medical condition, like diabetes or a broken leg," he continued. "It needs to be managed, but it does not render you incapable of making your own decisions. In fact, your actions over the past week, identifying a threat, finding an ally, formulating and executing a complex escape plan, are the very definition of competent behavior." He turned to David, who had been listening intently from the other side of the room. "You'll have my full written report by 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I'll be more than happy to testify to this in any court in the land. It will be a pleasure to dismantle the shoddy, self-serving diagnosis she was saddled with." After Dr. Finch left, the relief was so profound I felt lightheaded. David ordered dinner from a nearby restaurant. As we were eating, he got an alert on his phone. His expression soured. "Well, they're running right on schedule," he said, turning the phone screen toward me. It was a news alert from a local TV station's website. There was a picture of me, a smiling photo taken years ago, my hair shorter and darker. I looked happy, carefree. I felt a pang of loss for that unknown woman. The headline read, "Endangered Senior Missing from the Pines Community." The article quoted a distraught Sarah Peterson. "We're just sick with worry," she told the reporter. "She's been so confused lately. Her memory is failing. She doesn't know who she is. She could be anywhere. We just want our mom home safe." Rage, pure and hot, burned through me. My mom. That viper was calling me her mom while trying to bury me alive. They were painting a picture of me for the world, a frail, old woman lost in the fog, a tragic figure to be pitied.
"She's good," I said, my voice low. "She knows exactly which buttons to push. The concerned daughter, the helpless old mother." "It's a classic strategy," David said, his jaw tight with anger, "and we are about to blow it to pieces." The next morning, armed with Dr. Finch's signed ironclad report, David launched our counter-offensive. He called Sarah's lawyer, a man named Roger Kensington, from a respectable-looking firm. David described the conversation to me later. He said he began by calmly informing Mr. Kensington that the missing person, Helen Peterson, was in fact safe and sound and had retained new legal counsel. Apparently, there was a moment of sputtering confusion on the other end of the line. Furthermore, David had continued, his voice dripping with professional courtesy, "We will be in court first thing tomorrow morning to file a petition to immediately suspend Michael and Sarah Peterson's guardianship on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation and elder abuse. We have a report from Dr. Alastair Finch that refutes your claims of incompetence in no uncertain terms. I trust you're familiar with Dr. Finch's work." Kensington knew the name. Every lawyer in the city knew that having Dr. Finch as an expert witness for the other side was like finding yourself in a boxing ring with a heavyweight champion. "The police have been notified that Mrs. Peterson is no longer a missing person, and any further public statements your clients make describing her as confused or endangered will be met with a defamation suit. Have your clients at the courthouse tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the emergency hearing." He hung up. The first shot had been fired. They knew I wasn't lost. They knew I had a lawyer. They knew, to their horror, that I was fighting back. I could almost picture the scene in my son's perfectly appointed Pottery Barn living room, the frantic, furious phone call from their lawyer, the look of disbelief, and then pure, unadulterated rage on Sarah's face. The game had changed. They were no longer the caretakers of a helpless woman. They were defendants. The courthouse was a world away from the beige, muffled silence of the pines. It was all hard surfaces, marble floors, polished wood benches, and a cold, imposing sense of gravitas. For the hearing, David's firm had provided me with a wardrobe. I stood in front of the mirror in the hotel bathroom that morning and saw a stranger looking back, but for the first time, I liked who I saw. She was wearing a beautifully tailored navy blue pantsuit, a simple cream-colored silk blouse, and low, sensible heels. Her white hair was expertly cut and styled. She didn't look frail or confused. She looked formidable. She looked like a woman you didn't mess with. When we walked into the small courtroom, they were already there, Sarah and Michael, my son. Seeing them in person for the first time since my memory wiped itself clean was a jolt. Michael looked pale and haggard. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, the picture of a man being led to his own execution. He looked weak, and I realized with a sudden, startling clarity that he had always been weak, easily manipulated by a stronger will.
Sarah, on the other hand, was radiating pure, venomous fury. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive suit were a kind of armor, but her eyes gave her away. They were narrowed, spitting hatred at me. The performance of the worried daughter was over. This was the real Sarah, a predator whose prey had just turned around and bitten back. When she saw me, poised and calm, flanked by the shark in a suit that was David Chen, her lips thinned into a white, bloodless line. She had expected to face a disoriented old woman in a frilly nightgown. She was not prepared for this. The judge was a woman named Eleanor Vance, no relation to Arthur, a fact David had gleefully confirmed. She was about my age, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through every lie ever told in her courtroom. She looked at the file in front of her, then at Sarah and Michael and their flustered lawyer, Mr. Kensington, then at me. Her expression was utterly unreadable. The proceedings began. Kensington went first, trying to paint a picture of a loving family forced to make a difficult decision. He spoke of my erratic behavior, dangerous forgetfulness, and their deep and abiding concern for my welfare. It was a beautiful work of fiction. Then it was David's turn. He stood up, calm and methodical.
"Your Honor," he began, his voice filling the room, "we are here today because a family's deep concern looks, to an objective observer, a great deal like premeditated fraud." Kensington jumped to his feet. "Objection! Counsel is being inflammatory!" "Sustained," Judge Vance said, her voice dry. "Stick to the facts, Mr. Chen. But I am interested to see where you're going with this." David gave a slight bow of his head. "The first fact, Your Honor, is the report from Dr. Alistair Finch, which I have submitted to the court. It concludes unequivocally that my client, Mrs. Helen Peterson, is of sound and competent mind. It diagnoses her documented memory loss as dissociative amnesia, a condition which, as Dr. Finch makes clear, has absolutely no bearing on her executive cognitive functions. In layman's terms, she may not remember her own wedding day, but she is more than capable of managing her own checkbook." He let that sink in. The judge was flipping through Dr. Finch's report, her eyebrows climbing higher with every page she turned. Kensington was starting to look green. "But it begs the question, doesn't it?" David continued, pacing slowly. "How did we get here? How did this intelligent, capable woman end up in a locked facility, stripped of her rights? The answer, I believe, lies in another document. Your Honor, this is a loan application submitted to Sterling Mutual Bank 2 months ago. It's for $250,000. He placed the file on the judge's bench. Sarah made a small, strangled noise. "This was the loan taken out by Michael and Sarah Peterson. And the collateral they used to secure this rather substantial loan? The fully paid-for house belonging to Helen Peterson." My breath caught in my chest. My house, the one Sarah wanted me out of so badly. It all snapped into place. "And here's the most interesting part, Your Honor," David said, delivering the killing blow. "The loan agreement was signed, and the power of attorney which they used to access the deed was activated on May 23rd. This was precisely 2 days after Helen Peterson was committed to the Pines following a competency hearing that she was tricked into and did not understand." The courtroom was utterly silent. The air crackled with the sheer audacity of what they had done. They hadn't just put me away for some future inheritance. They were in a financial hole so deep they needed my assets now. They had cashed me in like a winning lottery ticket. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. That's what I was thinking in that moment, but the he was no longer an abstract idea. It was my own son, my Michael, whose world was collapsing around him in a marble-lined courtroom. This is an outrage," Kensington blustered, but he had no conviction. He'd been handed a case built on a mountain of lies, and David Chen had just set off the dynamite at its base. But it was Sarah who broke. Her mask of composure didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. She leapt to her feet, her face contorted with a vicious snarl. She was losing her mind. Ask anyone. She put her keys in the sugar bowl. She was going to burn the house down and leave us with nothing. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. "This is a trick. That man," she gestured wildly at David, "he's put all these ideas in her head."
"Mrs. Peterson, please control yourself," the judge warned, her voice sharp as steel. But Sarah was beyond control. "He was supposed to handle it," she shrieked, whirling on Michael. "It was his business that failed, his gambling debts. I just did what had to be done to save our family, and you just sat there and let her rot." Michael shrank in on himself, his face ashen. He looked at me then, for the first time, and in his eyes I saw not malice, but the pathetic, bottomless cowardice of a child who had been caught. He had followed his piranha of a wife right off a cliff. "That's quite enough, Mrs. Peterson," Judge Vance said, her voice now dangerously low. "You have, in the last 30 seconds, done Mr. Chen's job for him more effectively than he could have in an hour. Please sit down." Sarah, still breathing heavily, seemed to realize what she'd done. She crumpled back into her chair, her mask of superiority replaced by the ugly, blotchy face of defeat. "Mrs. Peterson," the judge said, addressing me, her tone now surprisingly gentle. "Helen, I have read the report. I have heard the evidence, but I would like to hear from you. Do you have anything you wish to say?" David gave me an encouraging nod. This was it. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I wasn't the scared, confused woman at the card table anymore. I wasn't even the frightened fugitive in David's car. I knew who I was. I was Helen Peterson, and I was taking my life back. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and even, "it is true that I have a blank space where most of my life used to be. I do not remember my husband's face. I don't remember raising my son." I glanced at Michael, whose face was now buried in his hands. "But as Dr. Finch's report shows, my mind is still here. I can still reason. I can still learn. And I can still recognize evil when I see it." I turned my gaze to Sarah. "I have read my diary. I know that I did not like or trust you, even when my memory was intact. My old self, the woman I don't remember, she saw you for exactly what you are, a parasite, a selfish, greedy woman who sees other people only for what you can take from them." Then I looked at Michael. The anger I felt towards Sarah was hot and clean, but what I felt for my son was a cold, deep well of disappointment. "And you," I said, my voice softening with a sorrow I hadn't expected, "you are my son. I may not remember you, but my body does. My bones ache with the fact that you stood by and let this happen, that you signed the papers, that you left me in that place to be medicated and managed until I faded away completely. You didn't do this for love or concern. You did it for money. You traded your mother for a loan." I took a breath and turned back to the judge. "I don't want their pity. I don't want their apologies. I just want what is mine. My home, my freedom, my name, and I want them out of my life forever." I sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. Judge Vance looked down at her papers for a moment, then took off her glasses and looked over them at Sarah and Michael. "This court," she said, her voice ringing with icy authority, "finds that Helen Peterson is, in fact, fully competent to manage her own affairs. The temporary guardianship awarded to Michael and Sarah Peterson is hereby terminated, effective immediately. All control of Mrs. Peterson's assets is to be returned to her forthwith." She wasn't done. "Furthermore, given the testimony I've heard today, and this rather disturbing evidence of financial fraud, I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office for a full investigation into criminal elder abuse and bank fraud." Sarah let out a small, horrified gasp. "And finally," the judge said, looking directly at me with a glimmer of what I thought might be respect, "I am granting Mrs. Peterson a permanent restraining order against both of you. You are to have no contact with her, direct or indirect, for any reason. Now get out of my courtroom." It was over. Just like that.
The months that followed were a whirlwind. There was a criminal investigation. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Michael and Sarah both took plea deals. They lost everything. The house, which was leveraged to the hilt anyway, their reputation, their freedom. Michael got a suspended sentence with 5 years of probation. Sarah, as the clear ringleader, got 18 months in a low-security federal prison. It wasn't a lifetime, but it was enough. It was justice. I worked with David to clean up the financial mess. We paid back the fraudulent loan by selling the house, my house. I was sad about it for all of 5 minutes. It was full of ghosts I couldn't remember anyway. I bought a lovely, bright condominium in a different part of the city, a place with no memories except the new ones I was making. One of the first things I did after I got settled was drive out to the Pines. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street by the service gate I'd escaped through. A few weeks later, after much legal wrangling by David, Arthur Vance walked out of that gate a free man, his own neglectful family having been shamed into moving him into a proper assisted living apartment near his beloved law library. He became my first and best friend in my new life. We'd get together on Thursdays to play chess and drink good whiskey, not the swill he'd had in his room. My old memories never came back. The white room in my mind is still there, but it doesn't scare me anymore. I have a new life now, one I've built myself from the ground up. I have my diaries and old photo albums, and I'm slowly getting to know the woman I was. Sometimes I feel a pang for the memories lost, the feeling of holding my son's hand, the sound of my husband's laugh, but I have also been given a rare gift, a second chance, a clean slate. I may have lost my past, but I won my future. And I have learned that the person you are is not just the sum of what you remember. It's the choices you make when you have every reason to give up. It was a long, strange journey that started at a card table where I didn't even know the rules of the game. But in the end, I learned. Oh, did I learn? I learned that when they tell you it's your turn, you'd better be ready to play your hand for all it's worth. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below.
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.